So welcome to another video. In this video I'm going to attempt to recap an original Atari Lynx. Here you can see it powered on. Obviously you can see on the screen that the screen is pretty bad, so we're just going to see whether new caps are going to make a difference. The sound's pretty loud on this one. Again, just to see whether new caps will make a difference to it. As far as I know, this has never been recapped before. This is the second Lynx that I will have recapped. I've already recapped an Atari Lynx 2 before and a Sega Gamegear. Both of these went without any issues, but this is the first time I've tried the original Atari Lynx. So if we just switch it off and get to the disassembly. Just remove the power cord. We just flip it over. Here's the caps that I'm going to be using. These came from a online eBay seller. I've used him before for the Gamegear and the Lynx 2. It provides a very nice diagram of where all the caps go. And as we go through the video, I'm going to be listing the caps that you need. So on with the disassembly. Just remove these 4 screws, and obviously make sure you remove one of the game cartridges as well. So here we are, just taking out checkered flag, which you saw on the screen a minute ago. And then the back cover should just lift off. It's pretty easy. Just held on with just attached to the main board with a couple of wires here. So we can lift out the main board by just grabbing the edge of the cartridge connector. Just slowly giving it a bit of a wiggle and lifting it out. We put the top part of the case to the side. Just peel off the rubber membrane for buttons. And to make life easier working on this, we're going to just desolder the speaker and the connecting battery wires. Here's a better shot of the diagram of the caps that we're going to be removing and replacing. So first off, in with the soldering iron. It's important to remember which way round these 2 battery wires go, so that when you come to reconnect them, you're not reversing the polarity. In this particular case, they're kind of crossed over. So the red goes to the left pad and the black goes to the right pad. So just applying a bit of heat on here. And that's the red wire removed. Now for the black one. There we go. And now we move onto the speaker. Again, try to remember what wire goes to what pad. And we've got the speaker removed, and we move the rear case out of the way. With the tip of the soldering iron a quick clean. Just going to clean these solder pads up with the desoldering gun, so that they're ready for when we resolder the speaker back on, and also clean up the pads from the battery connection. The desoldering gun I'm using is one of these, I think they're Chinese made copies of a well-known brand. You can get them from Amazon or eBay. I've posted the link to the one that I'm using in the description. Very useful. Had no problems with it so far. Does the job it was meant to do. I'm very happy with it for the amount of soldering that I do and desoldering. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with C39. So all the caps that come in the kit are the correct values. Some of the voltages are a bit higher than the ones that come off, but the voltage doesn't matter as long as it's higher than the original value. It's fine, but you must get the capacitance value right. So as you can see here, I'm just warming up the pads on the underside of our C39 cap, applying a little bit of solder to the pads. Helps a little bit as well. So as you can see, I've just got my fingers on the cap on the underside, just giving it a little wiggle as I heat up each pad, and it should come free like that. There we go. Next, we just want to clean up the pads so that we've got nice clean holes to put the new cap through. Sometimes it helps just to blob a fresh bit of solder on there, and then you put the desolder gun on and just suck it up. This is another tip that I use sometimes, is I sometimes get the tip of the soldering iron and just put it through the hole on the reverse side of the pad and use a manual desolder pump just to suck it through. Sometimes that works better. So when inserting the capacitor, you must make sure that the polarity is the right way round. On this board, they've clearly marked the positive and the negative side. So on the capacitor, the longer leg is the positive, and the shorter leg is the negative. The first one done, just checking that the joints are solid. And now we can just snip off the legs as close to the top of the solder as possible. We don't want any excess. Just double checking what capacitor we're going to be removing next. So this one is C23. Just warming those pads up. And there she goes. Quick blob of solder on each pad using the solder gun. a little bit of a problem pad. So again, just there we go, nice clean hole. Set the capacitor through, making sure the positive and negative in the right hole. Sometimes I bend the legs just slightly, just so it holds the capacitor to the board, makes it easier to solder. And just a quick drop of solder in each thread. Make sure we've got a nice connection. Take the snips and cut off the excess legs. So a quick inspection. Next up we have C29. Just resting the board on the edge of my hand, just giving the capacitor a little wiggle as I'm heating up each leg, swapping from one to the other. You can feel the capacitor start to move. This one was a little bit tight. Sometimes you can move them out, just snip off one leg, so it makes it easier to remove the other. Oh, there she goes. Probably wouldn't recommend doing it that way, because then you've got to do this. You've got to suck out the leg from the hole. Not the best way to do it. Much better to persevere, heating up each leg and then wiggling it out, holding onto the capacitor. There we go, we've got the holes nice and clean. Just double checking we've got the right capacitor in our hands. Some of these capacitors are slightly different sizes to the originals. Some will be slightly smaller, some might be slightly larger, so you have to, as you're going about this, you just make sure that if it's a larger capacitor, you're going to leave yourself enough wiggle room if you have to bend the capacitor over when you come to put the case back on. This one actually is not too bad because it's quite a small one, so it fits pretty much in the same space. So this time we're going to remove C20 and C19 since they're both next to one another and they're both the same value. It's just easier to do it in one go. Same technique, heat up on one side and wiggle on the other. See, I'm using an Antex soldering iron. The one I'm actually using in the video is one that my granddad bought me for my birthday, probably over 20 years ago. It's obviously had several different nibs since then, but it's just a very basic soldering iron. And it still works perfectly. So I can highly recommend this brand. Again, the link to this soldering iron is in the video. They still sell it, which is still remarkable. I believe it's the same soldering iron brand that a lot of schools use. Well, they did when I was at school anyway. Okay, while we're here, I think we'll also get rid of, we'll also do C26 and C25 too, seeing as they're also in the same area. Just makes more sense just to clean this area up and redo it all in one go. There we go. There's one. This board seems a little bit more stubborn than the Lynx 2 to remove the caps. Maybe it's maybe a different type of solder, or maybe it's just because it's a bit older. Just clean up these holes. I think I might invest in one of these PCB holders that you see some of the other people using on YouTube. Stops this messing around. just making sure we got all the right caps for this section. Okay, so that's all the caps correctly inserted. Just holding my finger on the back just while we bend out some of these legs a little bit, just so that they stay put and don't drop out. Just clean the solder tip. Always helps. The solder I'm using has already got flux in the core. Some people prefer to have separate flux. Just depends what kind of job you're doing, really, I think. Just checking all the legs feel solid. Should have a nice little sort of twang to them. It's good, they're all fairly straight. Now we're just going to make sure that they fit, because this is quite where they slot in is quite a congested area in the case, and sometimes you don't want to make the mistake of soldering the cap in, cutting the leg, and then finding out that the cap doesn't fit where you need it to, or that you haven't got enough room to bend the cap over to make it fit the case. Obviously just catching something somewhere. Might just need a little bit of a wiggle. We just need to adjust one of them slightly. So just heat up the pad slightly and use your thumb on the cap just to bend it over a little bit. There we go. I think that's looking a lot better. It seems to be sitting flat in the case, which is good. Maybe just a slight tweak. We just need to snip off the legs now that we're happy with that. That's it, all the legs snipped off. Just have a quick look. Caps, they all seem pretty solid, it's good. Sorry, it's a bit out of shot. Next we move on to C38 along the top edge of the board here. This one, this particular cap's proven a little bit difficult to remove. this cap was still proving a bit troublesome to remove, and the battery actually ran out on the camera while I was removing it. But what solved it was actually switching to another soldering iron that had a slightly larger tip on it, which was actually able to transfer a lot more heat. This particular pad needed a lot more heat. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where it's a good idea to just place the cap into the pads, and then place the board back into the case, so that you can be sure that the cap isn't gonna snag on any part of the case, and then solder it while it's in place. This way you make sure that you get a good fit when you come to reassemble your Lynx. Just a quick note: if you've been watching any of my other videos, you might have noticed in this one that the sound is hopefully a lot clearer, a lot better. Previously, I was just using the microphones, the inbuilt microphones on my laptop, but this time I've gone ahead and bought a dedicated microphone, a toner microphone. That plugs into the USB port, and I think the quality seems to be much improved. So if you like the sound of how this video is sounding, you might want to check it out. I'll put the link to the product in the description, and also the link to the camera that I'm using to film this top-down shot from. It's just a Nikon DSLR, quite a few years old now, probably 2012, but still does good video footage. Okay, you can see that red cap is quite a lot taller than the original one, so making sure it fitted the case a couple of seconds ago was the right thing to do. Now we're removing C75. Here we go, that one came out without too much trouble. Just a bit of solder in the holes that needs cleaning out. Shouldn't have too much trouble with this one fitting in the case, as it's quite a small replacement in comparison to the capacitor that came out. You can see the solder that I'm using is a iRhoda 1mm solder, lead free obviously. So next we move on to C42. This one's a little bit tricky as it's right next to the plastic frame for the screen. Just got to be careful that you don't touch the soldering iron on the screen. Not too worried about this one because I think the screen is past it, and I'm going to be putting a Ben screen in this at a later date, so there'll be a video for that, I'm sure, at some point. So here you can see where I'm actually using the slightly larger tip soldering iron now to remove these caps. I was just struggling a little bit too much with the pinpoint tip that I had before. There we go, that seems to have done it. A bit of a blob of solder on the pads on one side. Just helps transfer the heat a bit better. Again, just putting a bit of solder on the pads, then remove with the solder gun. Bit of IPA alcohol just to clean the flux mess off the pads with a cotton wool bud. Again, just going to make sure this fits before we commit to soldering the capacitor. All seems to be sitting quite nicely, so let's get this one soldered into place. Just going to re-go over that tricky one we had from earlier on with the larger tip, just to make sure that the contact is really good. Okay, next up we need to remove this the shielding from both sides to get at the other capacitors which are underneath. So here I'm just heating up the big solder blobs on the copper side, just to remove and suck up as much of the solder as possible. This is where the desoldering gun really helps. You haven't got to mess around with any of the desoldering braid. And then once you've got enough of the solder up, you just get a very thin, flat-bladed screwdriver. And you just see what I'm about to do here is you just put the screwdriver just very lightly underneath the copper plate, and then just use the heat of the soldering iron whilst you lever up on the screwdriver, and this should help you free the tabs that are bent over the edge of the board. So you can see that I've lifted the copper there. Again, do the same thing. Just want to remove this copper sheet, which we can just slide out from underneath the tabs. Just this last one, just sticking just a little bit, I think. Oh no, it's okay. Just delicately pull the copper off. There we go. You can see there's some kind of sort of sticky tape. I'm just gonna bend back these tabs so we can remove the silver shielding on the other side. A little bit tricky, but it's not too bad. There we go. There's one. There's two. There's three, and then we've just got to do this last one. So we're just heating up the solder. Just using a pair of pliers just to straighten the tab a bit because they're still slightly bent over the edge. As you can see, the shielding starting to come loose. Just this last one again just needs heating up a bit more. Bit more desolder gun. Clean up the other tabs. Helps if you have quite a large soldering iron tip on this. That's right, you wouldn't be able to do it with a needle nose one. And as you can see, the metal shielding just slides out, and now you can get to the other caps in the top corner, and there's one beneath the actual cartridge port itself. So C11 is a fairly tricky one to do because this is the capacitor that's below the cartridge port. Just putting a couple of blobs of solder on it here just to make sure we've freed up the contacts and the solder connections a little bit. It's kind of a little bit tricky because you can't get your fingers in there. So what what I did here was I've actually got a pair of so what I've actually done here is I've actually just put a screwdriver underneath the capacitor I'm going to use just to lever it away from the board as I heat up each leg. There we go, it's loose and it's just fallen out. Just clean up the solder pads. Bit of IPA and cotton wool bud. Now this capacitor is a bit taller than the one that came out, so you kind of have to pre-bend the legs to slide it under the cartridge port and into the holes, and it has to lay over flat, and you kind of want to position it in a way where it's not going to get in the way of your cartridge. Here we are removing C10. This is just above the top edge of the cartridge port. Bit of IPA, just cleaning up the flux off of the shielding contact plates. Again, this is another capacitor that was quite a bit taller than the original one that came off. So you have to look at seeing if we need to bend it over to fit it in the case. So it's a good idea on this particular one to just solder it while it's in while the board's placed in the case, because you know it will fit when it all goes back together then, and the solder will hold it in place. I always move the case out the way in between each capacitor removal and replacement, because you don't really want to drop a hot soldering iron or desoldering gun on it, especially if the case is in pretty good shape as the one that I have is. So just prepping the next capacitors for removal. So here we're going to remove C8 and C7 at the same time. There we go. Just clean up the pads. Work seems to be going a lot quicker now with this larger soldering iron tip. Now remember, these ones, we need to make sure that the metal shielding will go back over the top of them. So next up we have C76 and C9. They're on the bottom right corner. Just alternating between the two points, gradually pulling the capacitor out. You can feel it move. And it releases from the board. So we've got one leg released. Just pulled that up. Now, yep, here's the next one. Clean the solder tip. Bit of IPA to clean up the contact. This is where we're just checking to make sure that the shielding is going to fit. I'm just going to bend these capacitors over and then test fit the shielding. Luckily these ones I left enough margin that I could bend them over. As you can see, that fits under the shielding quite nicely. And that's the capacitor done. Just giving the board a little tidy up with some IPA and cotton bud on the button contacts and around everywhere I've soldered. Next up, I'm going to replace the MOSFET. This is the easiest way to do this, is to actually snip both the single legs with a pair of side cutters. And then we're going to apply some fresh solder to the big tab on the back edge. This is just so it should make it easier to remove when we come to extract it in a minute. And all we need to do is grip the MOSFET with the pliers. There we go, MOSFET's off. And then it's just a case of cleaning up the pads with the soldering gun. Quick clean up with IPA again. place the new MOSFET in position, just holding it in place with some spring nose tweezers. It stops it from sliding around or lifting off the board. Make sure you've always got a good contact with the board. Just a dab of solder on each of the feet. It's nice and solid. Then you just solder down the tab. And then all that remains is to put back on the copper shielding. So just make sure the shielding is very flat. Just holding down the shielding with a screwdriver just to stop it curling up as you use the soldering iron. And use a pair of long nose pliers just to bend over the solder tabs. And then again, just using the screwdriver just to hold things in place while we finalise the soldering. So now we're going to reconnect the battery wires, just tinning the wires. And then tinning the pads. And then lastly, it's about reattaching the speaker. So upon reassembly, I noticed that my Lynx doesn't have the piece of plastic insulation to insulate the speaker from the circuit board. Seems to have gone missing somewhere. Didn't really have a suitable replacement, so I'm just using some insulation tape just to stop the metal surround of the speaker coming into contact with the exposed solder points. This is a good tip. It's a good idea to clean any of the button contacts with a pencil eraser. This just removes any of the carbon build-up on them. Just makes the buttons way more responsive. You'll notice that they come up really shiny when you do this, so it's a really good tip. So now I'm just fitting the button, the rubber button membranes back into the top side of the case. This bit's always tricky. You kind of have to bring the two pieces together vertically to get it to go back together properly. Putting the 4 screws back in. It's important you put the screws in the correct way round, because if you put the screws on the left hand side in the right hand holes and the right hand side in the left hand holes, the screws will poke through the plastic. So make sure you're using the right screws for the right side. And only tighten them just until you feel that they're tight. Don't over tighten. And plug back in the power supply and put the cartridge in. And it's power on. As you can see, the screen has still got the defect that we saw earlier in the video. Sound is still just as good. So in this particular instance, no real noticeable improvement from recapping. I have to say that when I've done a Lynx 2 and a Gamegear, it completely transformed both consoles. So there you have it, original Lynx recapped. Remember to check out the links in the description for any of the tools or equipment that I used in the making of this video, as it might help you.